Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Tuesday. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, ready to give you guys a good freaking show. I hope have a very good guest alongside me today to help accomplish that goal. He is fantasy football subject matter expert. This is my opinion, but also just a reality. Truly one of the best in the business. NBC Sports Edge finest. You've heard him also as a co-host on the Ship Chasing Podcast. Pat Kerrane at Pat Kerrane on Twitter. Pat, truly, you're one of my favorite people in the industry. It's your second time on the show. Thanks for coming back, man.
You're one of my favorite people in the industry, and so it's great to be back.
So much cuteness already getting on here. Maybe we can focus a little bit more on the football side of things. But truly, people, if you have not been catching Pat's work over at NBC Sports Edge, the amount of work you put in before the draft even happened with your just rookie tiers and everything was simply spectacular. You know, just being willing to embrace the full, I guess, range of outcomes for all these players, because that's, I think, the most frustrating part of this. Like, every single NFL player is objectively awesome at football. It's usually the situations, you know, their volume, and just plain old bad luck sometimes that actually is what decides what's going on. So actually taking the time to have nuanced thoughts on the matter, Pat, it might sound like common sense, but as you know, not always what we see in this industry.
Yeah, it is funny because almost every single year, the ADP around these rookies really hardens, and like going off script, like by a couple picks, you know, even the overall picks, people are like, you're an idiot. It's like, go look at the old ADP. Like, you know, I feel like if anything, we're not getting crazy enough with this stuff. And to your point about the NFL players all being good, in some ways you could argue all of these rookies are bad. Like, they all need to get much better to ultimately become the fantasy stars that we're looking for. Like, the bar that we're looking for talent from, you know, from a fantasy football perspective is so high. You need to be an absolute star. And so for any of these guys to become that type of player, they need to get much, much better going forward. So that's why this is ultimately so difficult to project, is we need to figure out who's going to actually make a big leap in terms of their skill level in the next year or two.
That is going to be the main topic of discussion today. I want to look at a redraft point of view, not too much dynasty talk today, just at 2022 in particular, about these rookies and now how we feel about them based on the landing spot. It's not everything, but it does matter, again, particularly when looking at 2022, because to Pat's point, maybe some of those rookies that aren't quite as ready will be forced to be ready sooner than we anticipated just because of that open depth chart. So, Pat, let's spend one question on an underwhelming position group, and that is the quarterback class. You know, we thought we hated them before the draft, and we found out the NFL somehow hated them even more. So before the draft, you know, Malik Willis, pretty much consensus fantasy QB1. He throws the ball far and he runs a ton. We all accepted that. We all got that. Fantasy QB1 Malik Willis. But now all of a sudden, man, like, barring injury, barring just an atrocious first 10, 12 games from Ryan Tannehill, I really don't think we're going to see Malik Willis much, if at all, in 2022. If he had been a top 10 pick, different story. They, you know, two quarterback, obviously that's what we need to live with. But the same thing goes for most of these other guys, save for Kenny Pickett. So, Pat, out of Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, Desmond Ridder, and Sam Howell, who do you think is most worthy of a redraft dart throw, while fully understanding probably not going to have any of these guys ranked inside our top 20?
I think it's Pickett. Unfortunately, you know, I wish the question bars me from talking about Willis, which I don't appreciate. But Pickett is so, you know, now that you've set it up like this, I'll talk about Pickett, where I do think that the conversation around Pickett is a little off in terms of the fantasy aspect, in terms of his fantasy archetype, because he's seen as like this very low ceiling guy, and I think that is true of his real life value. Like, he's not going to become a superstar quarterback, I don't think. I mean, I think basically everyone agrees it's a very low probability that he gets there. But he's not like, you know, this really sophisticated kind of reader of you know, his reader of reads. Coverages, yeah. He's not sitting back there and going, you know, his first read, second read, third read, and just like going through it like a veteran guy. He's kind of more of, and Hayden Winks has talked about how he thinks he's kind of like Ryan Tannehill. And he's decently athletic. He's got decent size. I think we should think of him more as kind of like the Tannehill, Baker Mayfield archetype. And he's a willing scrambler. And he's also pretty good under pressure. And he's got decent accuracy. So all of that is like, he's not going to panic under pressure. He's going to probably, he's probably not getting to his third read a lot, which means he's running. So while he's not like a true dual threat, I do think that, he's not going to be like a Jimmy Garoppolo type of fantasy score where you're just like getting, depending on your league settings, like 18 points while other people are getting 24 and 25. Like, I do think, he's got a shot at getting you kind of the 20 points per game. And the only justifiable reason to take Kenny Picket in the first round in a draft where no other quarterback goes in the not only the first but the second round is that he's ready to go day one, right? If you're the Steelers, the only reason to take him is because he's ready to go day one. He's got to beat out Mitchell Trubisky. I think we're all, a little bit we're not like remembering as clearly how bad Trubisky really is. I think Pickett will beat him out in training camp. If he doesn't, I think the pick is already a disaster for the Steelers. What's the point of this if he can't beat out Mitch Trubisky? But that's who I would be betting on. The other guy, Corral, very similar kind of profile, scrambler, decently accurate, probably more accurate than Pickett. I think Darnold will get a couple starts, but then Corral will take that over. So those would be the two guys. I'm not that into Ritter. I just don't like him as much as a prospect.
Congratulations on being the first analyst to talk about Pickett for an extended stretch and not bring up those baby-sized hands. What do you think about his ability to enable Deontay Johnson? He's someone I'm a little bit lower on this year just because he's now being priced basically of what we've seen him operate. But, are the Steelers really going to be one of the most pass-happy offenses again? Will Pickett lean on Deontay as much as he did over two other, in my opinion, viable receivers in Chase Claypool and now George Pickens? Like, I've seen Deontay be fantastic in all phases of the game. Even some of these punt returns he's had over the years. The dude's great with the ball in his hands. We see the route running chops. I mean, he beat Jair Alexander deep at one point last year. He can do it all. I understand that. But my God, Pat, it seems like we need a lot to go right. And I despise doing some efficiency studies for wide receivers. And I know you know this. I don't like seeing Deontay Johnson alongside 10 other guys that we would never dream of using a top 3-round pick on. Do you think Pickett, even if he's not going to be a top-end fantasy quarterback himself, can help Deontay Johnson stay in the promised land?
Yeah, I think this feels a little bit like San Francisco last year where we were kind of taking stabs on receivers. And it's like, I don't want to draft all of these guys on the same team, but I want to draft them all. Also kind of like Denver last year where you're like, I know I'm picking, like if I take Sutton and I take Judy, like, and kind of the answer was no one really, but you're kind of building in like, this is probably not going to work out for everybody. And that's kind of how I feel about the Steelers right now. Is that like there's Pickett or Pickens is good. I think he's a good prospect, and then Chase Claypool is good. Deontay Johnson's good. They're going to be dumping off to Najee. This isn't going to be a super high scoring offense, so someone's failing. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I'm not taking shots here. And Johnson isn't super expensive. And I think your point about his well-rounded skill set is a really good one. Ben Roethlisberger was targeting him constantly, but like he's targeting him. We're literally. He wouldn't run a route.
He just stood there.
He stood there. Like, that's not maximizing Deontay Johnson's talent when his route is turned to the right and Roethlisberger will hit you. So if Pickett's like better than the corpse of Roethlisberger, which I think he could be, at least for fantasy purposes, we can talk about an ADOT for Deontay Johnson that's a little further downfield. The guy gets open at will. Pickett might lock onto him. I think there's outcomes where Johnson really beats his ADP. Those outcomes probably mean pretty bad seasons for Claypool and Pickens, but that's okay. Yeah. I think, we still want to be taking shots. And I also want to be taking some shots on Claypool. Maybe he's a big slot. Maybe Pickett is locking onto him in that role. So I think someone on this offense is probably doing pretty good because I think there's talented receivers in this offense.
Great point on Claypool. I believe there's a report that actually came out this week about Claypool maybe having the lead in the slot, which makes sense. He's played there more than Deontay has over the past 2 seasons. Pickens definitely doesn't profile as a slot type. Maybe they change it for the NFL, but with Deontay, like I think people just kind of assume because he's like the shorter wide receiver that he's a slot guy. They did this with T.Y. Hilton for years at the end of his career, and it's like, no, he plays on the outside. It's legal to still do that in the year 2022. So good stuff on Pickett. Last thing with these quarterbacks mentioned, again, just not expecting really Malik Willis to have a chance to start, but with Matt Corral only facing Sam Darnold, you said before, only a few weeks of Darnold maybe before we do get Corral out there. Desmond Ridder only behind Marcus Mariota. Sam Howell only behind Wentz. Would you say that among those three, probably it is Corral, Ridder, Howell in terms of likelihood, like who's going to start the most games?
Yeah, I do. I think Mariota, I mean, he has a familiarity with the offense. I mean, he did get beat out by Ryan Tannehill for a job in the offense, so it's not ideal. But I think Ritter's definitely behind the eight ball a little bit more than Corral. Where like the fact that Corral only has to beat out Darnold is really wild. Yeah. That should be pretty easy. I wouldn't be surprised if he beat him out in training camp. I just think Corral's more talented than Ritter. I liked him a lot better as a prospect, and he's not as athletic, but he was actually more willing to scramble.
Yeah.
He's more accurate. So I'm more into Corral, and maybe that's coloring the way I see this will go in terms of him earning starts. I liked Howell a lot, but 5th round, man, that's rough. And they clearly value Wentz. I don't know why, but they do, so I would be surprised. I kind of view him more like Willis, where I think it all kind of has to come off the rails. They need to miss the playoffs, and maybe they throw Howell out there for the last few weeks when they know they're not missing the playoffs, which is basically, I think, Willis's path to playing time this year as well.
Only in the NFL can you have like a Carson Wentz, a Baker Mayfield, like truly a top 30 person on the entire planet at doing what they do. And we're just like trash. Don't want anything. Don't want anything to do with that guy. All right, man. Enough quarterback talk, though. Let's get to the good stuff. Breece Hall is with the Jets. So when this happened, probably sent out some dumb tweet, but I think like tweets during the draft should be the same as like tweets during primetime football games. Just let us bark, let us say some shit that won't make sense a couple of days later. Let us have a good time. So I didn't love the landing spot, but the more I look at it, man, with Breece Hall, other than Buffalo, that was the dream, get him that 3-down roll next to Josh Allen and just watch all the fantasy points roll in. Other than Buffalo, is there really a better spot that Breece could have ended up in than the Jets? With all due respect to you, Michael Carter stands out there. There is an opportunity to get a 3-down roll, and there just really wasn't an open spot like Najee Harris had with Pittsburgh last year, I think, when you zoom out and look at the league.
I agree. It wasn't a very good year for landing spots. I think Atlanta would have been pretty nice. Yeah. I know this is a Cordell Patterson show, but by the end of the year, he could have had that backfield to himself. So that would have been pretty nice. And, I think he would have been a good fit for that system, same as he is for the system with the Jets, kind of the same thing. So that's a little disappointing. I think long-term, the Chargers would have been pretty nice. I think you got 2 years left on the Eckler contract, and it's sort of like they form a 1-2 punch, and then it'd be pretty easy to get excited about the long-term outlook for Hall because he profiles as a guy who'd be capable as a receiver. He had 0.98 career yards per out run, which is good, but it's not great. It's not like the type of back who typically like forces the issue. So I do think Michael Carter is a bit of an impediment, not just because he's pretty good, but he's going to be there a while. I mean, he's got 3 more years left on his rookie deal. Connor Hughes wrote in The Athletic, he thinks that LaFleur is philosophically committed to a running back by committee. So you don't love that. So I think, yes, there's not like that many spots. I'm talking about the Chargers where he's playing with Eckler, and we probably wouldn't be happy about that. But it's more like, there wasn't that spot for him to go to. And I do think the Jets is definitely like a spot where you do want to downgrade him. That said, I was doing my redraft rankings today for our draft guide, and I think I'm going to be ahead of market on Breece Hall just because he's really talented. Let me see. I had him. We got to pull this up.
I got him RB16 right now. I was about to ask you like if he's freaky enough athletically, because some of the comp groups I've seen are just out of this world. Like I hear you, Michael Carter's there, but we know it in today's NFL. There's only a couple backfields that really are run by one back. So are we willing to go with Breece over guys like Zeke, like Montgomery, who, probably not the same athletic specimen, but maybe we're a little bit more sure about that week-to-week workload right now?
I am running back 14.
There we go. Higher than me. Okay. Answers that. Upside RB2. No, I think that's where he should be going.
Because, I think one of the real issues with drafts this year is that there's a ton of running backs who are like 27, right? Or they're like late 26. And that is not, that is like kind of where the age cliff begins for these running backs. And it can go quick. When it goes for running backs, it goes really quick. And you're also looking at guys like, I have him behind Kamara, but man, I'm tempted to put him ahead because you got a potential suspension. Kamara was not nearly as efficient last year. Kamara's entering his age 27 season. So, I'm looking at guys like, Zeke. I want him over Zeke. I mean, Michael Carter's not coming for Breece Hall's job. Tony Pollard might be coming for Zeke's job. I know we've been predicting it for like 2.5 years, but it could happen this year. So, yeah, I think I'm still ahead of market just because he's talented. He's sort of insulated in the sense of like he's not getting benched. You know, he's not getting outplayed in a 3-down role, but the upside is definitely not as high as it could have been.
Couple of the teams we mentioned with those landing spots, Chargers, Falcons, Texans, they did eventually fill that spot, but it was just with a day 3 back. So yeah, if we could have gotten that round 2 capital in that spot, that could have led to a lot more excitement. But only one other guy really did get that round 2 draft capital. That was Kenneth Walker. Sorry, James Cook as well, but we'll talk about him in a minute. I get it with Walker. You turn on the highlights and it's a fun time. Like Pat, people that know more than me about running backs talk about his vision, his contact balance, all these great things that I fully understand they exist. But damn it, man, these are words that we never even dream of using in fantasy football between September and January every year. What do we care about? Volume. What does Seattle not really have open? Volume. Like there is a chance that Rashad Penny just works as their starting running back for this entire year. Not likely, but it would not be the first time we've seen this team just roll with, their running back over someone that has the superior draft capital. God forbid we even see someone like a DJ Dallas or Travis Homer take that pass down role like they continue to do when Penny was even going off last year. So how do you kind of rank Walker as opposed to guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cordero Patterson, Miles Sanders, who were way more confident in the role? Maybe they don't have Walker's like natural talent or upside though.
Yeah, I think part of it is I'm not that confident in those guys' role for like the whole season. Okay. Like Sanders, I wouldn't be shocked if like his playing time decreased throughout the year. It's the last year of his deal. They're probably eyeing, a different backfield construction next year. CEH has just not been good. I do have CEH ahead of him just because, Chiefs running back. I have him ahead of Patterson and Sanders. But I don't feel great about ranking Kenneth Walker, and I'm like way below the market on him because, yeah, like a rookie committee back who doesn't catch passes. By the way, he's 211 pounds. So is he the goal line back? If he's not the goal line back, you're in trouble, man. You're in trouble as a rookie. Like, how do you project high value touches for Kenneth Walker? It's difficult. So it's like you got a between the 20s runner who's paired with Rashad Penny, who all he does is rip off long touchdowns. There may not even be that many carries between.
And now they're in a terrible offense.
They're in a terrible. I'm glad you said it first because I know your boy Drew Lock is going to be captaining the ship here. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this offense either. And then like Rashad Penny, the interesting thing is that the Seahawks, they did this to Rashad Penny. They played other running backs over a guy they took in the first. And now they could play Rashad Penny over the guy they just took in the second, which would be kind of delightfully ironic. But Penny was so good last year. If you look at rush yards over expected, the NFL Next Gen stat, which is one of my favorite running back stats, Jonathan Taylor led the way there. Nick Chubb was second. Rashad Penny was third. He had 23 fewer rushing yards over expected than Chubb. He had 109 fewer attempts. Rashad Penny led the league in rush yards over expected per attempt by like a wide margin. The dude was going off at the end of the year. I don't know, man. Like, so in addition to the bad offense, in addition to him maybe not having the goal line role or catching passes, he's sharing the backfield with this guy. This doesn't sound great at all. So
like I want to lower him more than I already did just talking through this, man.
I know. I think I'm lowering him as well after this conference. I mean, to be honest, I want to rank Penny over him. Not because I think Penny will have the better season even, but like when Penny has the better season than Kenneth Walker, he might have an incredible season. I just have such a hard time seeing Walker becoming this running back who you need this year. Like, what's the path to you needing Kenneth Walker? To your point about DJ Dallas or Travis Homer, like his yards per route run profile is one where you expect him to be a 2-down guy. Like even if he hits, to be like a pure 2-down guy. So yeah, I think I just talked myself into Sanders over him.
I think so too, man. We haven't, like with a rookie, it's a different. We haven't seen him in Seattle. They did take him with a 2nd-round pick. Maybe he walks out and is the lead dog, but we have this tendency in fantasy to, I think, like just try to will guys to disappear from these committees. It happens with Melvin Gordon seemingly every single place he's at, like J.D. McKissick with Antonio Gibson. So I'm not saying that Walker won't work ahead of these guys, but I don't think we're giving nearly enough credit to this group. And we didn't even bring up Chris Carson, who is could be healthy. Like, I don't know. It's a degenerative neck issue. I could not think
and
of
they
a
say
worse.
they want him as the starter if he's back.
God damn. Yeah. Not great. I'm putting Miles Sanders over Kenneth Walker. It's just,
me too.
Look at all the things that we just said had to go right. Like, and for what? To be the Seahawks, the shitty ass Seahawks lead running back. And he's probably still like, doesn't even have the 3-down role. So sorry, Kenneth Walker, great player,
and like, I do think he'll outscore Penny, but I'm always thinking about like, what if I fade this guy and he hits, like, how bad does it hurt? Because I was not high on Najee Harris last year. And guess what? It was fine. Like, Najee Harris kind of did everything everyone thought in terms of the workload, but he wasn't efficient, which was like, his profile suggested he might not be very efficient in terms of yards per out run, which he wasn't, or in terms of hitting big plays, which he didn't do that either. So it's like, if a guy is going to be fairly expensive, obviously much less expensive than Najee, and it's just like, what's the actual ceiling to where, like, you had to have this guy? I can see a ceiling with Penny where it's like, if you didn't have Penny in the year 2022, like, you didn't win. Like that. Do you see that with him? Maybe I'm just getting too carried away with last year.
I mean, he was always good. That was the thing. He just got hurt early on in his career. But like, as a rookie, he was averaging over 5 yards per carry, which, okay, I know it's not the end all be all stat for running backs, but still pretty good. In his second year, man, I remember he had a touchdown against like the Steelers. I want to say like week 2 or something. And he just like bounced outside, just exploded out of a cannon. And I was like, oh shit, Rashad Penny is actually like a really good running back now. I see why he went in the first round. So if we're going to see this price discrepancy grow where like Penny becomes going in like the RB, outside the top 36 and stuff, like he's going to be the only guy probably in that range that has the chance to take over his team's job and actually get like 250 carries. So from that perspective, I think you're right. Because I was loving Penny around that RB 30 mark before the draft because it didn't really make much sense for the Seahawks to add another running back here. But, alas.
They're the Seahawks.
They're the Seahawks. All right. Talked about the big 2, 4 additional day 2 backs. So other than Hall and Walker, got James Cook going round 2, and then round 3 guys in Rashad White, Tyrion Davis-Price, and Brian Robinson. Each one of them looking like the RB2 or worse, but these are some pretty good offenses we're talking about here with the exception of Robinson and Washington. At cost, so considering ADP now / kind of where you think it might be closer to August, who interests you the most out of this group for just 2022?
Rashad White, which, I don't think people are going to be as excited about for 2022 because you got Leonard Fournette there. Leonard Fournette just handled the whole backfield last year. But White has this elite receiving profile that we rarely see. It's not just that he was involved a ton as a receiver, which he was, but he had incredible efficiency, 2.59 career yards per route run. He's one of only 7, counting a very small sample size for David Johnson, drafted prospects with a career yards per route run of 2.3 or better. You got David Johnson, Christian McCaffrey, Kenyon Drake, Alvin Kamara, Kenny Gainwell, and Joe Mixon is that group. And, as Anthony Amico told me today, Gainwell, we're not done with Gainwell. So outside of him, it's just an incredible group.
I'm done with Gainwell. I'm sorry, Anthony.
I'm still taking flyers. But yeah, I mean, I just want to bet on these guys who are incredibly efficient receivers because they're going to find their way on the field. And as opposed to Gainwell, you actually have some decent size with Rashad at 214 pounds. And I think that size in this case is especially key because the narrative around White is like, guys, let's get real. He's not going to be Tom Brady's 3rd down back. And guess what? I don't care. It doesn't have to be. He just has to get on the field. Ronald Jones had 42 targets in 2020. Ronald Jones had 42 targets in 2020.
I know you love the guy, but probably objectively the worst receiving running back in the NFL had that many targets.
And guess what? He did not play on 3rd downs. He did not play in the 2-minute drill. He was never out there in obvious passing situations. Never, ever, ever. It was Dare Ogunbowale. It was anyone but him. So it's like, it's so clear that with Tom Brady, all you have to do is get on the field and you'll get targets. And if you're Rashad White in that case, you can flash incredible ability to the point where, yeah, maybe in like situations where they're going to be calling pass blocking plays, he won't be out there, but he would see a growth in terms of his efficiency or his opportunity as a receiver. And also, like, Dare Ogunbowale played with Tom Brady and was quite bad. So I do think that they will maybe eventually get White out there on 3rd downs if he doesn't make too many mistakes. But really, it just comes down to this level of receiving efficiency, this level of receiving volume, and size and athleticism, by the way, and draft capital. Like that, it just doesn't come around very often. When it does, I'm just betting on it every time. You're going to have to burn me like another 5 times with this profile before I move off it. And, Leonard Fournette, I think consolidating a workload is like a talent in some sense, but he hasn't been very efficient. He just hasn't been very efficient at any point, almost in his career. So for a guy they just took in the 3rd round to work his way on the field, if he's as talented as the profile suggests he might be, it's not that far-fetched. I mean, Fournette is not that young anymore. It would make sense for them to have another back spelling him at times. And if we get that, it could be kind of a Ramondre Stevenson situation where we see more and more of them over the course of the year.
I don't think White's going to have that much of an impact to Fournette's weekly role as long as he's healthy. But, man, what if something happens to Fournette? It's not like Fournette's like the only running back in the league we don't have to worry about injury risk for. Like, if we say that Fournette's equally injured, man, I think we can put White right there alongside like Alexander Madison and Khalil Herbert as running backs where they are one injury away from potentially being a top 12 player. Like, seriously, like that could be White's best case scenario. If they just Fournette gets hurt and they say, White, you are our new Leonard Fournette. Giovanni Bernard will come in on the 2-minute drill. But like Fournette had basically, to your point, even if he hadn't taken over the pass down role from Giovanni Bernard, he was still vying for the league lead in receptions, like even before Gio got hurt last year. That's how much Brady's going to feed his running backs, whether it's Fournette, whether it's Rojo, whether it's Rachaad White. So where I've seen him going right now, man, I am happy to scoop him up in that RB4 range because maybe we do get a little bit of standalone value. I think that's on the table for Madison and Herbert as well in brand new offenses and systems. And maybe, just maybe, with an injury, we're talking about someone that's going to be on the title of every single waiver wire column that following Monday. With the other 2 guys, James Cook, I had this thought in my mind that, because they flirted with Isaiah McKenzie a little bit, even playing running back a few snaps here and there. I was like, maybe they just want to go full on, 4 wide receivers and have Knox out there, have James Cook there, like make a scat back your full-time running back and just don't run the ball pretty much. Why the hell not? It's what we do in Madden all the time. But to hear Brandon Beane come out and literally say like they view James Cook as a sub back, they're kind of, replacement for JD McKissick. I just think we're going to continue to see the Buffalo Bills not have a top 30 PPR running back like they basically haven't during the entire Josh Allen era. And then with Brian Robinson, looking at what he did at Alabama, I think he caught like 35 passes his last season, pass blocking up and down, but we saw some good tape in the Senior Bowl. And I don't know, man, when you're a 220 plus pound running back, I think you can learn how to pass protect, particularly when you kind of got that dude's attitude. But you look at that in Washington, man, if Antonio Gibson can't get the 3-down roll, I don't know if Brian Robinson is going to be getting there anytime soon. That's what I'm trying to look for with these guys. Like if a couple things break their way, do they even have the ability to handle a 3-down roll? And it seems like Rachaad White is that guy.
Yeah, I think Cook could as well, but he's undersized, so it's just harder to see them like really leaning on him.
And they already called him a sub back. Like that's their words, not mine. I'm with you. I think he probably could handle it. It's only 10 pounds that we're kind of digging him for, but
and maybe he can in a couple years. Yeah, he puts on 10 pounds, it might be a different story, but it's harder to see this year. Kind of more of a passing down guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would love to be right about every single player evaluation. Sometimes, shout out Duke Johnson. I think I am right over what some of these NFL teams decide, but it doesn't matter. I can be right about Duke. That wouldn't have gotten me very far over the past couple of years if I just continued to go to that well. So good stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a mea culpa to make on the Dare Ogunbowale point because apparently I got my years confused. I think he was in the Jags in 2020, but they played with Sean McCoy on 3rd down, so the point.
That's right. Okay, same thing. Oh my God, dude! 2019, I remember going like they legit would have weeks where it was like, it was Rojo, Dari, and who was their 3rd one? Oh, Peyton Barber. That was the Peyton 3rd guy Barber. They had there. Yeah, and like no running back would even clear like 35% snaps. Absolute full-blown committee nightmare. All right, let's talk about some day 3 backs. Now, historically, rookie year and even moving on in the career, if you were not drafted in the first 3 rounds, back is against the wall in Fantasyland. We have seen some guys overcome it, though, being good running backs in their own right and just landing in the right situation. 5th round Jordan Howard, undrafted free agent James Robinson, Zach Stacy back in the day. Philip Lindsay. There's been a handful of guys, but really just over the course of 10 years, not that many. That's why it pisses me off when people are like, who's this year's James Robinson? Like, who's this year's decades? Who's next decade's James Robinson? Because that's how often you see an undrafted running back put together a legit RB1 season. With that said, we got Isaiah Spiller with the Chargers, Tyler Allgeier with the Falcons, two spots that we noted do have enough available opportunity, particularly on early downs, for someone to maybe carve out a role sooner rather than later. Are you interested in either Spiller or Allgeier at cost, even though they have the day 3 capital of making a 2022 impact?
Yeah, especially Allgeier. I like him a lot. And I think the more typical outcomes like a Michael Carter or a Ramondre Stevenson, like those are the types of outcomes that I think, we can chase a little bit.
Yeah.
But Allgeier, it feels a little Jordan Howard-y. You've got a backfield that I think is somewhat open. Like they really scaled down how much they were using Patterson. They started using him more as like a traditional running back at the end of the year, which was no fun. Yeah. And if you look at Allgeier, like he's not very fast. I think he ran a 4.6 40. But he had really strong breakaway numbers. And I think in the kind of Howard mold where he's going to get up to speed quickly enough and kind of a one-cut type of guy, he can, and he's a big dude. He's like I think he's like 224. So he's going to be tough to tackle at speed, and this is a system where they're familiar with trying to get a running back who's big up to speed quickly. They took the Titans backup quarterback. Now they're taking Allgeier, who would be a very good backup for Derrick Henry, but he might be a starter.
We got Anthony Furcher backing up Kyle Pitts now too.
Let's go. The backup Titans. I kind of like him in the backup Titans type of mold. I think, can be kind of a Deontay Foreman type dude in this offense if he's going to be starting from the week 1 in that type of role, which I think is a plausible outcome.
Yeah.
Then I think he's kind of a steal right now. Spiller is more of a priority handcuff. I'm a little bit less bullish on his talent level. I mean, there's some things to like, but the athleticism really wasn't there. Grant Barfield, in terms of yards created, was not a fan of Isaiah Spiller. So I'm a little bit less bullish on him, but I do think you want exposure in kind of the contingency value play with Spiller, just because that backfield is so valuable. And I do think he'll end up being quite a bit better than, Josh Kelly and stuff.
Really weird how Justin Jackson hasn't not only not been resigned, but just hasn't gotten seemingly any interest elsewhere. That's kind of the last thing we need to fall in order to fully get behind Isaiah Spiller. I'm not really, I am worried about Kelly and Roundtree. I'm not just completely saying Spiller's got them beat out, but Jackson would be the one where if he's back there, fully expecting him to be RB2. So keep an eye on that. I mentioned these guys earlier, but here is the full list. There's only been 5 top 24 fantasy football rookies that were not drafted inside the top 3 rounds over the past 10 years. Alfred Morris, Zach Stacy, Jordan Howard, Philip Lindsay, and James Robinson. To your point with Tyler Allgeier, man, the landing spot fits that prototype. It's a pretty much wide open backfield. Like Cordero Patterson is going to get, if he's healthy, like 200 combined carries and targets. And that's fantastic. But as we saw with Mike Davis last year, man, like he was pushing for that number as well. And if we can get that out of a legit RB4, RB5 in fantasy, I'll sign up for that. And then you throw in the possibility of CPAT getting injured, like, Patterson and Damian Williams, 2 30-plus-year-old running backs. I know CPAT's my guy and everything, but that's the sort of situation we should be willing to bet on.
And the nice thing about Allgeier is he is not a zero as a receiver. Career yards per hour on 1.11. That's better than Breece Hall. Like he could be pretty good as a receiver. And again, kind of that bigger guy who kind of can get up to speed and is difficult to bring down, maybe Fournette type of receiver, James Conner. People have comped Allgeier to James Conner, which I think is a really interesting one. So I wouldn't view him as kind of just purely a Jordan Howard in like a 2-down rusher only type. He could actually be more of a 3-down type if it all kind of breaks right for him with Patterson.
Good stuff on running backs. Let's get to some wide receivers. And guess what? No tight end talk, everyone. Thanks a lot, Arizona. Like we have one, maybe one guy, you put him behind Zach Ertz, even Jelani Woods, man. Now you go to the Colts and get that 3 tight end committee. Miss me with that. But we got some good wide receivers to talk about here. Drake London, like the discourse on Drake London was weird. He was kind of this year's prospect that was like, quote unquote falling, but no football was being played. I know he didn't end up doing his testing at his pro day, which didn't help matters. People had the concerns about the speed, but kind of everyone overthought this. And then like the draft comes around. Oh, okay. He's the 8th overall freaking pick in the entire draft. We do have Kyle Pitts there. He's going to be taking plenty of pass game volume, but my God, man, like there's a chance that Drake London sees 130, 150 targets in year one. Do you think there's a legit wide receiver one on the on the table here? I know I'm not putting him in the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson category at this point, but NFL just told us he's a top 10 player in the draft. He doesn't have any target competition. I would like to have a better quarterback than Marcus Mariota under center, but, it's sticking out to me from the PFF draft guide. Mike Renner said sooner rather than later, Drake London's going to be a 100-catch, 10-touchdown a year guy. Maybe that year could be 2022.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical that it'll be 2022, but I also was more on Burks than London coming in. But everything I'm about to say also applies to Burks. This isn't a Burks versus London thing. Okay. This is a how rookie wide receivers get there thing, which Jamar Chase is kind of the massive exception where he was the engine of his team's high volume passing offense, right out of the gate. But just so many, unlikely to repeat circumstances. I mean, one, he's reuniting with his quarterback. He's also a generational prospect, which we knew. We drafted him differently than we draft other rookie wide receivers. Everyone was on the same page that Jamar Chase is different. Turns out that he's different. But I think the more typical outcome for a rookie wide receiver is more like a Devontae Smith, where we get excited about how does anyone else get targets here? He's going to be clearly the number one wide receiver. But Smith only ran 31.2 routes per game last year, which is well below the average for a top 40 ADP wide receiver. Because when you have a rookie wide receiver is your clear number one option, you tend not to pass a lot, right? And I think the Falcons are in this situation where it's you look at their depth chart and you're this does not seem like they should have been okay with this going into the season. You didn't finish your depth chart. What happened? And you could make the exact same case for the Titans. They're not going to pass a lot. They're just not. They have, in the Falcons case, Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder as a quarterback. That would also lead you to believe they're not going to pass a lot. So I think we'll see routes in terms of opportunity, the routes being low for Drake London. That said, we do see rookie wide receivers hit. They tend to hit through efficiency. And Drake London, in terms of earning targets, should do so at a very high rate. And my hope is that, he's used on a fair amount of shallow stuff, short intermediate stuff. He's been compared, kind of to have more of a Michael Thomas type of role. I think he could be kind of like a Marcus Colston type. So if he's in that type of role, almost like a possession receiver type of guy, maybe get some work out of the slot. He could definitely be really valuable this year. But I'm a little skeptical that it turns into a true wide receiver one this year, as I am of Burks, just because these offenses are not going to embrace the pass in a way that's going to facilitate it, unless Drake London right out of the gate is a superstar, which we do see sometimes. And he's good enough prospect where that is possible.
With these, there are different types of receivers, but your Darnell Mooney's, Drake London, Treylon Burke, Brandon Cooks, the number one pass game option in a bad passing game that we don't necessarily want that much to do with, but we say, oh my God, the volume. Think about the potential target share at hand. Do you have a kind of general philosophy and how do you take someone like that versus a Gabriel Davis and Allen Robinson, a number two player, maybe doesn't have the same target ceiling, but we can certainly see them, flirting with 10 plus touchdowns far easier in a loaded passing game. Right now, Pat, I'm kind of leaning towards the Gabriel Davises of the world. If I'm getting an extra 20 targets per season with Darnell Mooney, that's nice. But I think if there is a time to, chase the heightened efficiency, it's more so a wide receiver than running back.
Yeah, I want to be chasing the efficiency, and that comes down to the talent, right? I love the wide receiver position in terms of evaluating it for prospects, in terms of, just drafting it. But it's because I feel like I'm taking really talented players and I'm betting on that talent to shine through, where you can bet on talent to shine through at the running back position, but it doesn't always happen. Or it'll happen, but it'll be oh, maybe we should have played that guy more last year. Huh. It's it doesn't change things in the same way, where if you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, it didn't matter what the plan was for Justin Jefferson as a rookie. He came in and they were oh, okay, we're going to do some things differently than we thought we might. That's, that it's harder to see that happening, at running back. And I do love betting on that at wide receiver. So I tend to be more the talent. I think the premium version of what you're talking about with Mooney versus Gabriel Davis is T. Higgins versus CeeDee Lamb. I think I'd rather have T. Higgins, man. T. Higgins is a star. T. Higgins, I don't think he was fully healthy last year, and that offense looks incredible. And he flashed, right? I mean, he flashed incredible talent. Defenses are not going to be able to focus on him, obviously. CeeDee Lamb has been good, but he hasn't been this elite talent that we thought he might be yet. Maybe this is the year. But I don't know. And luckily the market doesn't agree with me on this take, so I can just quietly scoop T. Higgins after CeeDee Lamb, and I don't have to be right about this. But but that's the one where I'm like, man, I kind of would just rather have T. Higgins when it comes down to it. But obviously, it's not always the case. Like I don't always want the guy who's in the better offense if I don't think he's the better player.
I would say, and you said it's a different version of the argument, but, Cowboys versus Bengals, okay, I'll get Burrow better than Dak. That's fine. But I don't think it's as big of a difference as some of the other guys we're necessarily discussing. But Bengals, I got Higgins and Chase, easy top 12. I think most should, maybe 13. I got to see where I have them, but might not be high enough, Pat. But the one interesting
I don't have to deal with McCarthy over in Cincinnati. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. The one thing I was going through today, because from 2010 to 2020, there's an average of 4.3 teammates that finished both as top 24 PPR wide receivers in the same season. So about 4, maybe 5 instances of that per year. If you look across the league, there are a lot of situations that we're kind of anticipating that to potentially happen. Buffalo, Miami, Cincinnati. As I'm going through this, I'm sure this is great podcast listening. Denver, the Chargers, potentially. The Cowboys, Buccaneers, depending on the Gallup and Godwin health of the matter. The Vikings, if Adam Thielen is going to actually play 16 games, not completely out of the realm of possibility. And then I think you could throw the Rams in there as well. So, I just listed 8 or 9 teams. 49ers, I mean, Brandon Ayuk from week 8 on was a top 24 wide receiver. Maybe the Drew Lock experience turns out well, and Metcalf and Tyler Lockett get back to doing their thing. So it is one of those where, we can kind of talk ourselves into 8 to 10 different situations, potentially enabling this. History tells us it's a little bit different. But hey, man, we have seen the league moving.
What's the historical rate?
4.3 pairs of teammates per year. So it's problematic. But I will say, Graham Barfield had a tweet yesterday where he was showing the number of rookie wide receivers to get over 100 targets has been spiking recently. So throwing the ball more, maybe we'll see more, teams just producing multiple high-end teammates. Crazier things have happened after all. Let's talk about. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think there's some of it too where you do have some contingency value. Contingency value isn't as strong at wide receiver as it is a running back. But I mean, if Jamar Chase misses 4 games, T. Higgins is going to smash over that stretch most likely, and maybe it'll be 2 duds and 2 unbelievable smashes, but because that's how wide receiver scoring tends to work. But I think you have that a bit with a number of these situations. I mean, Ayuk could really, really benefit if Debo. I mean, and Debo's got this contract issue, so you've got that level of contingency value. So I think that's one way you probably want to be a little bit overweight that 4.3 rate because you also have that contingency value issue.
Yeah. Absolutely. Real quick on Higgins, we have a cool tool on PFF.com, expected points, brainchild of Kevin Cole. It's just a good way of showing who are the biggest overachievers in terms of what we were expecting from their volume. You can also look at underachievers. Best running back last year was Jonathan Taylor. Best wide receiver, Jamar Chase. Makes sense. In terms of pure expected points per game, though, T. Higgins actually had a higher expected PPR points per game total than Jamar Chase. I mean, when they were both out there, they were getting fed pretty much equal, and it even leaned a little bit more towards Higgins. We're not saying draft Higgins ahead of Jamar Chase. Chase outperformed it. I think we all believe he is the better wide receiver there, but it really is it's not 1 then 2, man. It's 1A and 1AA. I don't even want to say it's 1B going
1AA.
there. So.
I love it.
And that was, hand up, one of my misses on, Tyler Boyd last year. I thought it'd be more of a kind of 3-way thing going on than the 2, but we've watched the film, gotten better, and we'll continue to apply that ahead and beyond. So more wide receivers. Got Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, and Treylon Burks. You mentioned before, I believe you had Treylon as your number 1 wide receiver going out. So I understand if you're just, trusting the talent and everything, but based on the landing spot, who do you think gained the most and then who just suffered the most? Pure landing spot.
I mean, I do think Burks gained a lot from the landing spot because of the player archetype that we weren't sure how teams were going to use him. And I think one of the worst things that could have happened to him was he lands in a spot where it's like a coach we don't feel great about. And they're like, he can do everything. We're Swiss Army knife. We're going to put him in the backfield. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And it's like, you're not as smart as you think you are. And this is probably just going to be a disaster. I think it's great that he goes and basically has to be the replacement for A.J. Brown. He's not going to be as good as A.J. Brown, but like that's the big wide receiver yards after catch is what we were hoping for with Burks. And like A.J. Brown, he played in the slot in college, but hopefully he'll be able to move to the outside and get used in a variety of ways, sure, but primarily operate as a traditional outside X wide receiver. I think that quietly is pretty huge for Burks. But in some ways, I think you could make a case Jameson Williams gained the most in the sense that, like, regardless of his quarterback and anything else, he was the 12th pick coming off a torn ACL. Like, what? He tore it in January. I mean, the NFL thinks extremely highly of him. And I do think, like, the draft capital, he could have been maybe a top 5 pick if he was healthy. Like, that's sort of what it's telling us. So I think that's super impressive. I think Garrett Wilson got hurt the most. We're not excited about the landing spot. Elijah Moore's there. Corey Davis is like one of those guys who we're going to just pretend doesn't exist, but he does exist. Exactly. He got targeted at a really high rate last year. Zach Wilson was like locking onto him. I think he's got a role in that offense. I'm not worried about the Denzel Mims hype cycle that we're getting again this May. I don't think that'll impact Garrett Wilson.
When these people say this, like, this is what pisses me off about your quote unquote real life football analysts. Like, they never have to rank these guys, so they just let shit fly out of their mouth. Like, oh yeah, Denzel Mims is set up for a big role. Where? Who is leaving the field between Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and fucking now Garrett Wilson? Dude, Braxton Berrios will probably play ahead of Denzel Mims. Like, 100%. The hell on with this.
Yeah, it's literally a team's wide receiver 5, and they're like, oh, he's going to be big this year. You should draft him.
Really flashing out there with no pads on.
But I do think that for fantasy purposes, you could argue that Garrett Wilson is a winner in the sense that we're all going to be able to get him more inexpensively now. His ADP is going to drop. And this guy's an awesome prospect. I'm not going to have enough in Dynasty. I know I already feel like I'm going to be underweight what I want to be. He basically checked every box. He's a little smaller than we'd like, 183 pounds, but he's got sub 4.4 speed. He was very efficient in college. He was very productive despite playing with Chris Olave and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who could be the number 1 wide receiver coming out next year. It's a really impressive profile for Garrett Wilson. If you're getting a discount on him, like, he's not as talented as London and Burks when he, I think, is. Yeah. And, like I said before, you're kind of making a bet on efficiency here. Like, maybe the Jets pass a little bit more than these other teams, and Garrett Wilson is just uncoverable as a rookie, which is possible. We've seen that before, and he's got the type of profile where that really shouldn't be shocking. So to get him at a big discount to the other guys, it does feel like kind of a win for us.
I want Zach Wilson to be good so bad. Like, we would have Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson doing their thing. We could have Breece Hall balling out there. And, like, the way Zach Wilson plays football is just fun to watch. It's like, fun. when it goes bad, it's terrible. I get it. But my God, man, like, not too many people just, like, it's weird to me how Trevor Lawrence gets a complete pass for last year, and we're not willing to give that to Zach Wilson, when I think if you actually watch the two guys, like, Wilson was, in my opinion, every bit as good as Lawrence last year, if not even better. I think his high against Tennessee was better than anything Lawrence had going for 60 minutes. But yes, Corey Davis, firmly, as you said, one of those guys we're going to pretend like he doesn't matter, even though he's going to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets. The Jets can get out of this contract after 2022, but they would be eating $13.6 million in dead money if they try to get rid of Corey right now. It's not happening. Don't tell yourself it's going to happen just because you're afraid about trying to project this messy situation. So hopefully Garrett does rise to the top there. My dynasty wide receiver 1 before the draft. Jahan Dotson, being forgotten about a little bit. First round wide receiver. I think people kind of scoffed because he really, even though people liked him, I think we all kind of had our consensus top 5, and he wasn't really in it. So when he goes to Washington, we already had Terry McLaurin there, just not a lot to really love about the situation either. So with Dotson, Are you willing to move him for 2022 behind guys like Christian Watson and Sky Moore, who have the better landing spot? But, if we just lined up the guys based on draft capital, history, and kind of where you think his prospects, Dotson has a superior draft capital. I think he's in easily the same tier as the players, if not better. Just the situation isn't as good. How are you approaching these three?
I think I'm a little lower on Dotson as a prospect. Okay. I just didn't really see it with him. He's a 4-year guy. He wasn't super productive. He was not efficient as an underclassman. So you're really kind of talking about the most dangerous thing is a senior wide receiver who earns their draft capital that year. We want guys who, if they're coming out after 4 or 5 years, we want them to be, these guys who are hyper productive for their entire career. We've seen some really strong receivers in that archetype, but the guy who, it doesn't really do that much, has a really good senior year, gets the draft capital. Those have been pretty dangerous picks. And then you also look at Jahan Dotson just being really small, 178 pounds. He's under 5'11". And you talk about Darnell Mooney as the number one wide receiver on his team. We're not excited. To me, that's kind of Dotson's future, maybe. Even if he gets there, we're okay, but so what? The quarterback play is not going to be great. He's not going to be someone who commands a ton of targets. He doesn't have elite speed. He does not have 4.4 speed. He was not used really as a deep threat primarily. He's kind of used as a classic outside wide receiver, but he's very small. And he wasn't super productive. So it does feel a little bit like a Darnell Mooney type, where maybe he starts to move into the slot over, this year or next year to some extent. And we see him being kind of a classic number 1 type who's really a number 2 type, but they just haven't found the number 1 type yet. I think is his long-term upside. Right now, he is a number 2 because Terry McLaurin's there, and I think he'll be the clear number 1. So I think both long-term and short-term, I'm just not that high on Dotson. Christian Watson is a similar type of low floor bet, but you can immediately see the ceiling with him just given the opportunity. And my brother Mike is a big Vikings fan, and he told me that the word is that the Packers tried to make the same trade up to pick 32 to take Christian Watson, was rejected. Then they ended up trading up to get him at 34. So, you could argue Christian Watson functionally is a first round pick.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think there's a huge draft capital discrepancy between him and Dotson, who I think most people thought would be a late 20s pick. And I think maybe Washington got a little carried away there. And then Sky Moore. Sky Moore just has the profile that I'm looking for in terms of the 3-year early declare guy, hyper efficient, really productive, was awesome after the catch, which I think is going to be really good for this system. Not a deep threat, but has good speed, and so should be used, I think. He could be a really strong target earner in the intermediate area of the field. And if you look at the Chiefs, it's they've got a deep threat in MVS. They've got a shallow guy in Juju. What they really need is someone who can soak up intermediate targets. Sky Moore can do that right away. And some of the biggest hits that we've seen in fantasy football have been from the second round. We've gotten A.J. Brown. We've gotten DK Metcalf. We've gotten Michael Thomas. The second round draft capital does not worry me. I think, it's sufficient if you also have a really strong profile, which Sky Moore does.
Do you like Sky Moore over Christian Watson straight up?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Look, it's a new situation. It's 20. Just because something didn't happen 2020, 21 doesn't mean it can't happen in 2022. But yeah, when I look at the list of first-year Packers wide receivers since 2000, James Jones 676 yards, Greg Jennings 632. That's the best. And with Aaron Rodgers specifically, we only have MVS at 581. That seems like, Christian Watson, no one's replacing Devontae Adams. I don't think the Packers would try to kid themselves. And, they went out and they've gotten Sammy Watkins. That makes sense. If you're not going to pay Devontae Adams, don't go pay someone else to pretend that they are Devontae Adams. So I'm not, criticizing their team building, but just, having that expectation that Watson's going to step in and give you a true huge ceiling. I think probably the most likely scenario in both KC and Green Bay is we see a bunch of guys, flirting with that 600 to 800 yard mark, but Sky Moore does seem to have the better chance to make that leap. I am with you with him over Watson. Pat, great stuff. I want to get your information though on a very hot topic, because this year we've already seen it. I've made the jokes, you probably made the jokes, but Velus Jones is now the guy who we have not seen take a professional snap, but we're writing him off. He's too old. Even when he's gonna make a catch, we're gonna talk about how much is beard grew or some shit. And this time he got in the end zone. We're writing him off. Same thing seemingly with Giants wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. He's too small. It's the Giants. They already have Tony. What are you doing? How did the Patriots take wide receiver Tyquan Thornton in round 2? They're already loaded there. He's just a fast guy. What are you doing? I mean, even 49ers, Danny Gray, round 3. I don't think I've heard a single person talking up Danny Gray as a viable fantasy guy this year, yet he was a round 3 pick. So I see the holes with these guys. I'm sure you do too. Out of these players, though, Wan'Dale Robinson, Tyquan Thornton, Velus Jones, and Danny Gray, which of them would you most be willing to actually throw a dart at ahead of 2022?
Wan'Dale Robinson's the guy for me. His profile's pretty strong, actually. Like, he has everything that I'm looking for, really. He's also small. He's 178 pounds, and he's even shorter than Dotson. He's 5'8" and a little and some change, listed at 5'11" at Kentucky. He's not 5'11", but he was really efficient in yards per route run, 2.86 career yards per route run, which is awesome. He was very productive, 35% career yardage share, which is super high. I mean, I've been talking about Treylon Burks and how much, his career numbers. That's one of the big reasons that I like him more than London. He had a 36% career yardage share, but Wan'Dale Robinson just 1% behind him. I mean, his profile is really great. It's just that he was smaller than we wanted, and then he didn't have the athleticism. So you're like, what is this guy? I thought he was like this athletic hybrid guy, and now the NFL's not even going to be interested. But then I think we are still sticking with that. The NFL is interested. They took him in the second round. So I think he's a slot receiver, and, he's going to potentially get a lot of work right away. And he did everything that we're looking for in terms of production. It's just that he's kind of small. But, I don't know, at a certain point, an undersized slot receiver does become interesting if they're going to be good. And Wan'Dale Robinson looks like he might be good. And, at wide receiver, the athleticism, once the draft position comes in, it's kind of the thing you want to make, small adjustments for maybe, but you do not want to be, taking a guy off your board because he's not athletic. So Wan'Dale Robinson, I do think makes sense. I think Thornton, kind of the opposite case, where he's so fast that you could see him just kind of defying a lot of the stuff in terms of the production profile, which he really doesn't have. Velus Jones is funny because he's the type of guy where if he was a 5th round pick, I would be saying, look, he ran a 4.31 and he's going to be active on game days because he is awesome as both a punt returner and kick returner. If there's a wide open depth chart, he's going to be active. So we should be taking shots. But instead, because he went the 3rd round, everyone's like, gross. No, thanks. So we're kind of just completely out. And it's we shouldn't be completely out. I mean, it was a bad pick. Yeah. It was a bad pick, but we shouldn't be completely out. Danny Craig.
Let's watch the guys. Let's watch the guys play some games, man. These are quarterbacks I'm referencing, but I remember Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Daniel Jones. When these guys got drafted, they were just completely written off. And I'm not saying every perceived bad draft pick is going to turn into Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, but even Daniel Jones, who, yeah, they're not picking up his 5th year contract. You can probably call him a bust. He still gave us some fantasy goodness. Even if Velus Jones is not a great NFL player, if he has enough volume in a wide open situation, he's still going to be worth his absolutely free price of admission. So don't load up on him, but let's also not, let's not watch the guy ball out in the preseason and just be no, I'm still out on him. It's stupid. He's too old. So keep an open mind with it, but now continue.
And I do think that being active on game day thing is important because maybe there are some really big growing pains for him as a receiver. That would be expected given his profile, his advanced age and everything. He's got probably ways to go. Like I'm saying, all these guys need to get better in the NFL, but he's going to be active. So, he's not going to just pull a complete disappearing act where it's oh, remember they drafted Velus Jones? We're going to see him out there and, maybe he's able to impress and get a little bit more playing time. Maybe they use him on some sweeps and they use him kind of like Anthony Schwartz a little bit last year, but maybe they need him to play a bit more than Schwartz did. So yeah, I mean, if you got speed and special teams ability, you should maybe take the occasional dart throw on the guy. Danny Gray, I think I struggle with even more. He is the type he's kind of the guy I'm just sort of forgetting exists. Doesn't really have much that I'm looking for, but he is fast. And so it's am I going to take a Kyle Shanahan receiver and who's fast and just forget he exists? That seems like a mistake. So I agree with you. I think the draft capital for all these guys should have us taking shots.
I think Kyle Shanahan's going to dial up that, like 2019 Travis Benjamin role, get him like 10, 12 snaps a game and probably like 70 air yards to go along with it. But yeah, I mean, Danny Gray, he's probably not going to start in 3 wide receiver sets. Like obviously Debo and Ayuk for now, and Juwan Jennings, I think, does enough for them in the run game. Even if he does start in 3 wide receiver sets, because of how much Kyle Juszczyk is used and stuff, like it's just, we couldn't even think about using Jennings last year because the routes were just so low. So going to be tough for Gray. With Wandale, and I would kind of say the same thing about Thornton, just they're already paying Bourne. They're paying Aguilar, which never made sense, still doesn't, but he's there. Traded for Devontae Parker, Jacoby Myers. We got the tight ends and a run-first offense. Not loving that. Velus, I think he brought up a lot of good points. Can't be out on him. Wandale's the interesting one because Kadarius Toney last year, he was primary slot, but we saw him have games where he was used just as much, if not more, on the outside. I think the Sterling Shepard injury was actually what kind of forced him more into the slot. Sterling, love him. He does great when he's out there. We can't just assume because Cam Akers came back from an Achilles so quick that now in the rest of the time that these Achilles injuries are going to be so easy to overcome. So for Shepard and James Robinson, there's a chance they don't play football next year. Like that's in their range of outcomes. Maybe the Kadarius Toney rumors, there is something to them. Wandale Robinson, man, he could be the Giants starting slot receiver from day one. Worst case, maybe kind of like a souped up Isaiah McKenzie type for Brian Dable. I'm not totally out on this Giants offense.
Yeah, and I think Toney maybe has like a Deontay Johnson type skill set ultimately. He got open really easily.
Everywhere.
And he did that on the outside. Yeah, it wasn't just, he's not a slot receiver, I think. I think maybe they looked at the film and said, Kadarius Toney is either going to play on the outside for us or we're trading him because he won't show up. But, maybe they feel like he's better on the outside. I think Wandale Robinson probably is their starting slot receiver, and I'm skeptical of the Sterling Shepard recovery as well. I Achilles tears tend to be pretty bad. So, and it was like November or something that he tore it. So, I think it's probably safe to project someone else to start most of the year for the slot for the Giants, other than Shepard. And I don't know. It feels like Robinson should have the inside track at this point. And 2nd round draft capital. I mean, that's a big commitment.
The 4 guys that have, or the 3 guys that have come back from the Achilles recently, OJ Howard, CJ Uzomah, Cam Akers, 4 guys actually, put Marlon Mack in there. We're good. We're not good at all. We're objectively bad in the first year back. CJ Uzomah, a little bit better. I don't want to, throw him too much under the bus. Did good things with the Bengals. But, I watched those Bengals games. The 2 touchdowns, 90 yards against the Ravens. Like, I don't think there was anyone within 20 yards of him both times. But CJ Uzomah slander aside, don't freaking assume that guys can come back from the Achilles and be at 100% with absolutely no lost time. Pat, great stuff. I've kept you longer than I've asked, but I need one more thing from you. Your favorite day 3 wide receiver dart and why? Is it maybe Romeo Doubs? Last year, I set you up, and I think I nailed Brandon Ayuk as someone we were both excited about. Is it Romeo Doubs? Can we get behind him?
It is, yeah.
Yes,
that is the guy.
Go.
I like this draft class because we didn't get a lot of guys who I like going to day 3. Like David Bell, he almost fell to day 3, but luckily we got him in round 3. I think Justin Ross is really the only other guy that you could kind of consider as this guy, but he didn't even get drafted. So not technically a day 3 guy. It has to be Doubs. Doubs is sort of interesting because he wasn't like super, super productive in college, but he was pretty productive. Not quite to the level that you like for a 4-year guy, but pretty solid. And he was also pretty efficient, not incredibly efficient, but decently efficient, 2.23. Yards per hour as an underclassman. He had a 14.5 ADOT, which means he was very much a deep threat. We don't have a 40 for him. Doesn't seem like he's expected to be like super fast. He's only 201 pounds at 6'2". So it's kind of like, is he really going to be kind of likely a slow deep threat? He didn't have a great yards per target. Maybe that's not like kind of the role that's going to work for him at the NFL level. But if you look at, to your point with Christian Watson, if you look at how he's going to fit in the offense, I think the easiest way for Christian Watson to develop some rapport with Aaron Rodgers is basically just be MVS from the start. And maybe he gets used on some more design stuff and he gets more intermediate targets. I mean, MVS had like a 17 something ADOT. He was like a pure deep threat. Watson, maybe he's more like 14, 15 field stretcher, but also has some more intermediate targets as well. But if Christian Watson's in that role, then you could see Doubs maybe working into the slot or something. Maybe he gets used more on some intermediate stuff. We've seen this before with Chris Godwin, who was more of a deep threat in college and transitions into the slot. I think you can see that with some of these receivers, especially when there's opportunity where, like, if the Packers need to try out a guy in 3 different roles, like, who's standing in the way of that, you know? So if you've got a productive receiver landing on a team with a ton of opportunity and really great quarterback play, yeah, I think that's the day 3 guy.
Romeo Doubs. Heard it here from Pat. I've been a lifelong Romeo Doubs fan for literally weeks, man. So this is just music to my ears. I got the dogs going nuts upstairs because they're excited as well. That's going to wrap it up, man. Pat, thank you again so much for the time. Again, people can follow you on Twitter at Pat Kerrane with a K. Don't forget the fucking K, people. Let people know what you're up to this summer.
Yeah, we're working on a draft guide now, getting the ranks over as we speak, working on. And then going to have lots of good articles and great content in there. And then going to be writing some more research-based articles for the summer. It seems kind of crazy that we're zooming past the dynasty part of the offseason and going right into the best ball redraft part. It happened quicker than it feels like it should have, but we're here. So I'm going to be doing some more research-based stuff like I did last year. And then, going to be the season before we know it.
NBC Sports Edge. And the thing that particularly impresses me about, you, Denny, and Pat, the whole crew, as someone that used to work for Roto World myself, man, people just don't know what goes into the news grind like every single day, like having to carry some of those hours, the blurbs, the responsibility of really being the premier news source of our lovely fantasy football industry here, on top of all the content, podcasts and written. Truly a great job by all of you. So again, check out Pat and check out the NBC Sports Edge Fantasy Football Preview. Always fantastic stuff from that crew. For Pat, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.